Welcome to The Great Podcast, a show where we take a look at the important men and women of history and decide once and for all if they are worth all the fuss. I'm Jordan.
And I'm David. Welcome back. It hasn't been 2 months. I swear I'm good at doing my job.
Don't look at the date.
It's not important. But what is important is today we are going to be doing something a bit different. Because the show so far has pretty much been, we look at an important or interesting person and maybe gloss over one or two other people who were in between. But now we're in what we will call the crisis. I guess it's not we will call. History calls the crisis of the 3rd century. Is called. And it's, let's just say there's not a lot of very interesting or important people along the way.
Chaos.
So we're going to cover lots of them today with no particular focus or deep dive on one person. Cool?
Ready.
Cool. Let's get into it. So last time we saw the misguided and blissfully short reign of the young Elagabalus. The teenage emperor had been wholly devoted to his sun god, Elagabal, and he was obsessed with sex and luxury.
That's right.
I mean, teenagers. What are you going to do? His debauchery and flamboyant femininity had quickly turned everyone against him, even his close relatives. His grandmother, Julia Mesa, did her best to keep the lad in line, but there was only so much she could do because, again, teenagers. The power struggle continued in the palace until Elagabalus and his mother made their move to oust Mesa and her top supporters in government. As we saw last week, this plan backfired, and Elagabalus quickly found himself being forced to adopt his young cousin, Severus Alexander, as his son and heir.
Ah, yes.
And there was only about a 4-year age difference, so father and son, very close to the same age.
All teenagers. It's great.
Yeah. Resentful of this arrangement, Elagabalus started up the rumor that the young Caesar was dead or dying. We're not sure. Alexander was not seen in public for a short while, and the people, and most importantly, the Praetorians, started getting antsy. The guards demanded to see the Caesar in their camp at their shrine to Mars, which was an insult to the emperor, of course, but what could he do? The men with the pointy things are hard to ignore. After spending a stressful night in the Praetorian camp, Elagabalus lost his temper and ordered some of the guards to be arrested for disrespecting him and cheering for Alexander. This was the breaking point, however, and Elagabalus and his retinue soon found themselves hacked to pieces.
Oh, yes.
Good times, good times. This included his mother. Severus Alexander was then declared emperor, the second young teen to ascend in a row. Good times.
Well, the first one went so well. Let's get another one in there.
And Nero before him, all good times when teenagers become emperor.
Teenagers with absolute power. We all know it's a recipe for success.
Mm-hmm. So this is where we shall begin today. And like I said, we're not going to deep dive. We're going to gloss over lots of people as we traverse the beginning half of the crisis of the 3rd century. So since we're not going to have our normal rating, we're going to do something a little different, and I was going to grab a notebook, but again, I'm not good at my job, so I'm looking around for something to write on. I found one. It's on the floor over there. So, since we don't have someone specific to rank and do stuff, we're going to play a game where at the beginning of each emperor's reign, I'm going to ask you how long you think they will reign and how you think they will die.
Oh, man.
And just as a heads up, no one dies a natural death.
Well, I can't imagine.
All right, so Alexander Severus, he's about 13, and he just came to power with his mother and grandmother essentially at the head of things. How long do you think he will last, and how do you think he will die?
I'm going to go with exactly 13 months, and he's going to be poisoned.
13 months and poisoned.
Yep.
Okay. Good. There we go. We got that written down. So let's begin. As I mentioned, we're talking about the crisis, so I'll give you a quick rundown on what that really is in terms of history. It's roughly a 50-year period where the empire was brought to its knees. So far in our show, we have been living in the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. After the civil wars of Caesar and Augustus, the empire was mostly peaceful internally. We've seen a few blips, like the year of the 4 emperors and the year of the 5 emperors, but these were brief, and stability was quickly restored. But these happy times are coming to a close. As we saw last time, the troops have become restless. You'll remember during Alexander's reign, Elagabalus's reign, there were a bunch of just popping up, I'm emperor, no, I'm not, no, you're not, blah, 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 and everyone was dying and killing each other. Troops are declaring their generals emperors with alarming frequency at this point. And something is happening out in Parthia that we will talk about soon that does not bode well for the Romans. But let's look at our new boy emperor. Alexander was the cousin of Elagabalus, son of Julia Mamaea. He was around 13 years old when he ascended, but fortunately did not have the same temperament as his predecessor. Where Elagabalus was brash and expressive, Alexander was calm and studious. He did as he was told, to a fault.
Oh.
The one doing the telling was his mother. Julia Mamaea and Julia Mesa, his grandmother, ruled in his stead from the word go. To please the Senate and help the lad learn about administration, a council of 16 respected men was set up to guide the young emperor. On top of this, the best tutors in the world were brought in to educate him. These tutors had been an issue during Elagabalus's reign, and he had banished some and executed others to try and limit Alexander's popularity, which didn't work out for him.
Yeah.
Julia Mesa did not live long into her second grandson's reign, however. In 224 CE, she passed away. She had helped lead the Severan Dynasty back from the brink after her sister had died, but now it was in the hands of her daughter and grandson. The following year, Mamaea arranged for her 16-year-old son to be married, so you were wrong about how long he lasted.
No. I'm gonna hold on.
All right, sounds good. The lovely young woman was Sallustia Orbiana, and Alexander could not have been happier because you're 16 and you just got a great bride.
Right.
Good times. The two got along very well, but Mamaea was not so pleased. See, Mamaea was, let's say, controlling. Very controlling. She wanted all the titles and all the money and all the power. But in getting her son married, she had lost herself the title of empress.
Well, yeah.
Naturally. This, coupled with a good old case of mother-in-law from hell, led to Mamaea kicking Sallustia out of the palace a couple years into the marriage. No good. This was a grave insult to the young woman and her family. Her father was so offended that he made a terrible mistake. He went to the Praetorian camp to voice his complaints.
Oh, boy.
Which sounds kind of like a coup.
Potentially.
How do you think that played out?
I don't know. We're in crisis mode. Maybe it went well for him. Maybe a coup happened.
No.
No.
Mamaea took this as treason.
Well, yeah.
And
yeah.
ordered the father executed and the daughter exiled to Africa. Meanwhile, Alexander voiced only the
Yeah, I was
tiniest.
like, this dude just over here like, oh, no.
Yeah, please
No,
don't.
Mom, no.
Oh, because as we discussed, he did as he was told.
God.
Around this same time, the man put in charge of the Praetorians, a man called Ulpian, who was a jurist, lawyer, speaker, was doing his best to implement some reforms. See, the guards had gotten back into their bullying ways, as has happened each time a weak leader has been in charge. This was going on during Elagabalus's reign too, just kind of being dicks to everyone in town. The people of Rome were getting pretty sick of it. At one point, this tension erupted into widespread violence. Some altercation grew into a fight that then went on for 3 days. Civilians fought Praetorians through the streets of Rome. Soon, the poorly armed civilians took to the rooftops to toss down stones and roof tiles. Seeing no logical way to get them to come down, the Praetorians decided to light the buildings on fire. As one can imagine, the fire spread, and soon everyone was just desperately trying to save the city, except the Praetorians, who were like, cool, job well done.
Don't, projectile weapons exist?
Not many, and you certainly wouldn't have peasants with a lot of them.
No.
Oh,
no, instead
the
of burning the
Praetorians.
buildings down.
Got it, yeah. Maybe, but I said they couldn't find a logical way. Burning made the most sense.
No.
Yeah, they got them off the roofs. Did
Yeah.
it not get them off the roofs?
I love all the collateral damage and the rebuild and the now more money to rebuild.
Yeah, but that's not the Praetorians' problem.
You're right, you're
They were
right.
just tired of getting stones thrown at them.
Yeah.
After this unrest was quieted, Ulpian ordered the arrest and execution of the two men beneath him, whom he viewed as the instigators of the riots. What do you think their reaction was to this order? The Praetorians.
To what was the order?
To execute their two leaders
Of the peasants?
of the Praetorians.
Oh, they probably didn't like it.
No, not at all. The guards decided that if someone needed to be executed, it was this dude Ulpian who keeps trying to tell them what to do.
Sure. Yeah.
He made a run for it and got all the way to the palace. and still had the guards hot on his heels. He burst into Alexander's rooms and begged for protection. Now, the young emperor threw his imperial purple cloak over Ulpian's shoulders and ordered the Praetorians to stand down. He had the protection of the emperor. Now, the guards backed down, chastened by the boy and ashamed of their actions. Just kidding.
Sound right.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding. They murdered Ulpian
They probably
right
don't
there.
have any respect for this kid.
No.
Yeah.
They cut him to pieces, and the men who had only a few years earlier cheered their new young emperor had now made it clear that he had no power over them. Mm-hmm. Great. Though Alexander and his family could not openly execute the men responsible for this egregious action, he did pull a fast one on one of the main instigators of the riots. He offered him a promotion in Egypt.
Oh.
And as soon as he was on the boat, he slipped and fell and broke his neck
They hate all that happens.
or something. Something happened.
Yeah,
Who
weird
knows?
accidents. It's crazy. It's a wild world.
Yeah. So the emperor's power was questionable, but on the whole, the government was running well. As Herodian put it, quote, after Alexander's accession to power, he possessed the trappings and the name of emperor, but the control of administration and imperial policy was in the hands of his womenfolk, who tried to bring back a complete return to moderate, dignified government after Elagabalus. Sure, his mother was slowly building herself a small hoard of money off confiscated lands, but she assured her son that this wasn't about her getting rich. No. This was about keeping the troops happy, providing a nest egg should they need it.
Yes.
And there were still small revolts going on. Everyone was a little testy, but things were ticking along. But out in Parthia, something big was happening. For centuries, the Parthians had been a thorn in the side, but almost always came out the losers in whatever conflict the Romans had with them. The capital of Ctesiphon, you may recognize the name, has been sacked on multiple occasions by Roman armies. The latest attacks had come from Severus and Caracalla, who took lands from the region and helped destabilize their neighbor empire. We won't go into too much detail about this because we have a lot to cover, but the Parthians were not the dominant ethnic group in their domains. Parthia was made up primarily of what was previously the ancient Persian Empire. Think movie 300, Xerxes, all that. During the turmoil caused by all the incursions and other internal issues, one Persian nobleman, Ardashir, started to gather men and lands to his cause. He conquered his neighbors and soon became powerful enough to challenge the Parthian king Artabanus. Artabanus, we'll go with that. Artabanus had recently overthrown his brother, and as often happens in civil wars, he found himself in a pretty weakened state.
Yeah, you just had a bunch of infighting, and now, oh, look, the two armies are one very weak army now.
Yay! So when Ardashir began his war to overthrow the Parthian government, Artabanus had little to offer in response. The Battle of Hormozd, that's some
Perfect.
consonants that are in weird orders next to each other, was fought on April 28th, 224 CE. That's around the same time that Alexander was coming to power. And Artabanus died. This would be, right around the time that Alexander was becoming emperor.
Oh.
See, I wrote it down.
Perfect.
Ardashir then spent the next few years solidifying control over his new empire. And it would not be the Parthian Empire any longer. From the ashes of the Parthian Empire emerged the reborn Persian Empire, commonly known today as the Sassanid Empire. Pretty much so that we can distinguish between the ancient and more modern.
Yeah.
Fast forward a few years and gather around the table where Alexander and his mother sit with those 16 senators of the Emperor's Advisory Council. Imagine their shock and horror to hear that this new King of Kings had just marched his armies right into the Roman Empire. And not just into the recently conquered lands taken from the Parthians. Ardashir has marched possibly as far as Syria, deep into the eastern half of Roman territory. Fun. Now, you might be shocked to learn that Alexander was not a military man.
Probably not an anything man, really.
Well, that's actually, glad you say that. He is actually a young man by this point, and he's around 22 years old. We've gone a ways. His first attempt at resolving this Persian problem was to send an offer of peace to Ardashir. Many took this as a sign of weakness, but Alexander was not simply sending envoys. It is inferred from the coinage we have of this time that the Roman army was mustering since the previous year, and road repairs were underway to allow troops to march eastward with greater efficiency. Once the peace offers were rejected, as was expected, Alexander set out at the head of his legions. The governors of the eastern provinces demanded his presence, and a foreign invasion unlike anything seen before was not the time for the emperor to be hanging out in Rome. Mm-hmm. We don't have time to go into the nitty-gritty of this war. Plus, much of what we know is disputed between our sources, and it's hard to know the facts. The gist is this. The fighting was tough. Both sides won victories and suffered grave losses. By 233 CE, Alexander had pushed the Persians back across the border, and from his base in Antioch set out with 3 columns into enemy territory. Alexander himself led the center column, but for unknown reasons he remained stationary and was lethargic when his force did move. The northern column found great success, walked right through enemy territory, just pillaging and taking everything they wanted. But Alexander's delays resulted in the southern force facing off against the main Sassanid army alone.
That's not great.
It did not go well for them.
Yeah.
At the end of the campaigning season, Alexander and his bedraggled army returned to Antioch. Both sides were feeling the effects of this war and had just about enough of it. But Alexander was still in the process of rebuilding his army for another invasion when news arrived that was really annoying. There are 2 frontiers in the history of Rome that caused the greatest headaches. The eastern border with the Parthians and then the Sassanids, and
barbarians, I suppose.
Yep, the Rhine and the Danube frontiers around Germany. As Alexander prepared to finish his defense in the east, word arrived that the Germans had pushed into Roman territory in force and overrun several forts. Some sources say that Alexander was actually in Rome celebrating a triumph for his victory against Ardashir when he got this news, but we don't know. Remember the last time the Romans had pulled troops from the Rhine frontier to invade then Parthia under Caracalla and then Macrinus? The primary concern of these troops was that they were being pulled away from their families along the Rhine and leaving them exposed. Well, here we are. So by 234 CE, Alexander had amassed his troops along the Rhine. He had there was we haven't signed anything, but we both agree that the war in the East is on hold because we're both tired of it.
Right. Pause.
Yeah. Just time out.
Yeah.
Kid on the playground, not wanting to lose the game.
Yeah, right.
So he amassed his troops along the Rhine. They used pontoons to make a bridge and then crossed into barbarian territory to exact a little revenge. But Alexander was also sending envoys to the German leaders with offers of cash to stop the fighting. This might have been wise policy or even a delaying tactic that made sense, but as per usual, the troops were not too happy about this. Alexander had tried a peace offer with Ardashir after the empire was invaded. Then Alexander had acted as they saw it like a coward on the battlefield and resulted in a third of the army getting destroyed. Now he was offering money to the men who had sacked their homes and raped and killed their families. It was almost intolerable. As Herodian puts it, quote, in their opinion, Alexander showed no honorable intention to pursue the war and preferred a life of ease when he should have marched out to punish the Germans for their previous insolence. Now, as I have mentioned, the troops had been unruly for the majority of Alexander's reign, but they had always been far away when they declared someone else emperor. One guy in Alexandria had been declared as Alexander was marching east, but he fortunately drowned himself, and we didn't have to have a civil war about it. Now, however, the upset troops were all around the emperor, and many of them viewed him as weak and wished for a strong man to take his place and lead them to glorious victory and vengeance against the Germans. The man they chose was Maximinus Thrax.
What a name.
It's a dope name.
That's a great name.
So Gaius Julius Verus Maximinus was an experienced soldier in his late 50s, serving along the Rhine frontier under Alexander. He was born sometime around 173 CE in Thrace, which is in northern Greece, and where he gets his nickname Thrax, which is dope.
That's fair, yeah.
It is believed that he was some level of farm boy, basically a peasant. He was not a citizen at birth either. But he was large. The Historia Augusta, which we do not rely upon, claims he was around 8 feet tall. This is almost certainly not true, but he was a huge man, especially for his time. We have a friend who's 6'10", and
Yeah.
if that man was
8
like, "Hey, I'll be
feet,
your
huh?
emperor," I would say yes. One source also claims that he rose through the ranks of the military despite being almost illiterate. And one piece of the Historia Augusta that's just fun to mention is it frequently mentions that he punched horses unconscious.
What a move. This is straight up the mountain from Game of Thrones.
Yes, think that. Think that. His busts are intimidating, even though he's an older man. It's like, wow, you're big.
Yeah, that's wild.
Regardless of the truth of any of these rumors, the soldiers decided that this brute of a man ought to be their emperor, and so they proclaimed him. It's speculated that Thrax knew this was coming and put on the usual performance of, "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly. Okay, fine, if you insist. Let's go take care of Alexander real quick." When news arrived of this insurrection, Alexander had a near mental breakdown. Herodian says, quote, "He came rushing out of the imperial tent like a man possessed, weeping and trembling and raving against Maximinus for being unfaithful and ungrateful, recounting all the favors he that had been showered upon him." I can't read today. Those troops around Alexander promised to remain loyal and defend him to the end. But when the group of killers arrived, they stepped aside and let the men pass. Quote, "Trembling and terrified out of his wits, Alexander just managed to get back to his tent. There, the reports say he waited for his executioner, clinging to his mother and weeping and blaming her for his misfortunes." And yes, in case you were wondering, Alexander's mother has been with him this entire time.
Well, yeah, she's the one in charge.
Yeah, hovering over her 26-year-old son as he led his nation through war. And she would go down with him. The men burst in and slaughtered everyone who remained loyal to Alexander. And thus, the reign of Maximinus Thrax began in 235 CE. So, Alexander had ruled for around you said 13, and I was like, say years. You said months. 13 years.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And he did not die by poison. He died by stabbing.
Poisoning by sorts.
Yeah, lead poisoning.
Yeah, just metal.
All right. It's pretty good, all things considered. I will give you this heads up. That's the longest we'll see.
Yeah, I figured it would be shorter. That was
Yep.
surprisingly long.
So up until the Persian War, everything had kind of ticked along for him. It just worked. Mm-hmm. But the sources agree that Alexander was a weak leader, easily manipulated by those around him, especially his own mother. And it is at this point that many historians draw the line for the beginning of the crisis. Now, how long do you think Thrax will last, and how do you think he will die?
Oh, man. So Thrax gained power by just straight up murdering the emperor.
Mm-hmm. At the behest of the legions along the Rhine.
Middle of war.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing the new Persian Empire is gonna get ready to build up and come back in. I'm gonna go again. Not more than a year.
Okay.
I mean,
So less than a year.
yeah.
All right.
He's probably just gonna be assassinated. Not even assassinated. Just killed. Just murdered. Murdered again.
All right. We'll need a little more. Who do you think will murder him?
God. The next general emperor.
Next general emperor. All right.
And then the next general that says, "No, I'm the emperor."
Fair. Okay. So we got less than a year, and he'll be killed by the next general or his troops. Cool.
Yes.
So, Thrax was the lowest born emperor ever. While he was not the first military man to seize control of the imperial power, he was the first to come from origins beneath that of even an equestrian. Remember that a few years ago, when Macrinus took power, it was like, can an equestrian become emperor? That doesn't make sense. But Thrax had the love and support of his troops, mainly because he was one of them. He had joined the Thracian auxiliaries way back in 190 CE and climbed through the ranks. He had likely served directly under Severus and possibly Caracalla. Then he went with Alexander out east to fight the Persians. Finally, Alexander had placed him in charge of the new recruits for the German offensive. He was a strong, large man with military experience. In other words, the exact opposite of Alexander, who was meek and obeyed the orders of a woman.
How dare he?
So the men proclaimed Thrax emperor, and the Senate was then informed of the new regime.
Yeah.
Thrax did not much care about the opinion of the old aristocrats back in Rome. Because, hey, what was the Senate going to do about it anyway? As it turns out, many of them would try to do lots of things to stop this giant peasant emperor from maintaining his hold on power. As a new military emperor, Thrax pushed forward with an attack against the Germans across the Rhine. Mm-hmm. Shortly after his ascension, he built a new pontoon bridge and crossed the massive river. The first attempt by the Senate to get rid of him was supposed to have happened at that crossing. The plan was pretty simple. Wait for Thrax and his soldiers to cross the river, cut the ropes. Boom, now you're stuck on the other side of the Rhine.
Across the river.
Ha ha, blowing raspberries at him. However, this plot was uncovered, and Thrax made it very clear how he would deal with insubordination and treason.
Just beheading.
This is how Herodian describes our new emperor. Quote, he was conscious of the hatred against him for being the first man to rise from the most humble origins to such a fortunate position. But by his birth and normal behavior, he was a barbarian. Possessing the little bit of racism here, possessing the bloodthirsty temperament derived from his ancestors and his country, he devoted himself to strengthening his rule by cruel actions.
Nice.
All those involved in this plot and those suspected of involvement were ordered executed without trial.
Oh, yeah.
Good times.
Get him out of here.
Shortly after this, a unit of archers from Mesopotamia, who had been quite loyal to Alexander personally, planned to elevate another friend of the late emperor. However, the ringleader of the plan, i.e. the guy who said, hey, friend of Alexander, you should be emperor, seems to have switched side and murdered the guy he said, hey, you should be emperor, before it could unfold.
That's because he heard what happened to the other plot and was like, oh, never mind, I'm going to back that up.
He's like, you know what, maybe I'll go.
Sorry, man, I'm going to kill you. I got to kill you.
He thought about brownie points. He's like, I can go tell Thrax now about this plot.
Well,
and gain some brownie points. How do you think that turned out?
He's just going to kill you too, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when the traitor went to Thrax with the news of how he had stopped it, Thrax saw a spineless little bitch.
Right.
And so he executed him for being a, quote, false friend, which is just nice. So that all sorted, Thrax set out into the German swamps and forests and began his campaign. He fought the Alemanni tribe primarily, doing quite well despite heavy losses. And after thrashing this tribe, Thrax took the title of Germanicus Maximus. Germanicus Maximus Maximinus Thrax, which is a mouthful.
It's a lot. It's a lot of
and
titles.
Also raised his son Maximus to the rank of Caesar.
Oh, okay.
And just because he was a hopeless romantic, he also deified his late wife.
Oh, what a nice guy.
Which is so sweet. Next, Thrax set out for the Danube frontier to deal with those troublesome tribesmen. Soon, the Dacians and Sarmatians were also getting a classic Roman ass whooping. The troops were super pumped and very happy to finally have an emperor who could get things done.
Okay.
You know who wasn't happy about Thrax's reign?
Oh, the Senate.
Everyone
the
else.
Rest of Rome.
No one else really liked this guy. There's a handful of reasons the German tribes had never properly been conquered. One of them was that it's crazy expensive to maintain that level of invading force.
Yeah.
Especially with the rest of the border also needing to be manned. But Thrax had a solution for this. Corruption.
Sure.
Easy.
Right.
Easy. The order of the day was to extort as much money out of as many people as he could.
Just take more money.
There's plenty of money.
Yeah.
You just got to give it to me.
Just take it. It's fine.
Higher taxes were ordered, but it would never be enough. So instead, Treasury officials would go around and bring false charges against wealthy people.
Oh, good. Back to this.
Yes.
Back to this.
And then confiscate their wealth.
Now we're going to claim all your things.
Easy. Herodian goes into detail about rich men being out on the streets within a day because of some informer saying, hey, this guy did this. Boom, you're in court. All your money's gone. But this is also how you portray anyone you deem as a tyrant. You say they took everyone's money on a whim and for no reason other than to satiate their own greed. So he was doing this. We just don't know if it's quite as bad as the sources claim.
Well, I don't know if I'd say it's to satiate his personal greed.
Right.
He just wanted to continue fighting.
Right. Totally reasonable. Guys, give me your fortunes. Thank you. But there is an interesting quote from the translator of my copy of Herodian that I thought was very telling. It is no coincidence that the emperors who most successfully maintained the frontiers, i.e. Severus, Caracalla, and Maximinus Thrax, also had to rely on confiscations to pay the bill. There was just no other way to do it. Love it or hate it, to secure this troublesome border, every successful leader had to do dubious things. Everyone just hated Thrax a lot more than they hated Severus. I will note that I don't recall Marcus Aurelius having this issue, and he fought for like 15 years along this border.
Yeah.
So, but he was also at the peak of the Golden Age. So this hatred for Thrax and these administrators would boil over in a place that we don't often talk about too much in Roman imperial history because it's often calm and peaceful: North Africa. This territory is where ancient Carthage had been in the days of the Republic and is now a wealthy province, centuries in the imperial fold. In one of the cities of this province, a few wealthy young men found themselves about to be stripped of their properties by one of the treasury's bullies. Edward Gibbon, the famous 18th century historian, says the men managed to get themselves a 3-day grace period, during which time they gathered their friends, families, and slaves and armed themselves.
Oh.
They approached the administrator and stabbed him and his retinue to death.
They just said,
No, we're not doing that.
We're just going to kill you.
Yep, easy. You can't take my money if you're dead.
That's true.
Then they declared their governor emperor.
Oh, here we go. Good.
This was Gordianus, known today as Gordian the First.
Gordian. Oh, the first. Well, I mean, maybe that's good for him.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Gibbon says this, quote, Gordianus, their proconsul, and the object of their choice as emperor, refused with unfeigned reluctance the dangerous honor and begged with tears that they should suffer him to terminate in peace a long and innocent life without staining his feeble age with civil blood. Their menaces compelled him to accept the imperial purple. He's like, please no.
Like, no,
guys,
no.
please.
Why, man? It's cool down here.
I'm 80.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
He's 80?
His age was a significant problem. He was 80.
Oh
This
my
was
God.
This proconsulship of the nicest province in the entire empire was his
Yeah.
retirement.
Yeah. He was chilling.
Yeah, just big chilling. He had been a very distinguished senator throughout his life, which earned him this wonderful reputation where everyone was like, yes, Gordian, let's go. Now he was a usurper against the giant peasant emperor who had shown no mercy to traitors.
Because someone said, hey, this guy, he's the emperor.
Him. I want him.
No, it's not me.
Please don't.
It's not me.
So he knew he couldn't do this alone. All that to say, he said he wanted his son to join him.
Ah.
So that's Gordian the Second.
Okay, there you go.
So
Well,
they became joint emperors. Now, we have multiple emperors
good.
going at the same time.
Got 3 of them going.
So Gordian the First and the Second, how long do you think they will last?
Oh my gosh.
And how will they die?
Let's see. They're in northern Africa. And Thrax is what, in the northwest?
Northeast.
Northeast. Oh, okay. Isn't East where the...
Germany is northeast of
Either
Italy.
way. Yes. It's going to take a while for the Civil War to really get going. Like 2.5 years.
2.5 years. All right. And how will they die? Got to give one for each.
Gordian the First is just gonna he's gonna trip on a pebble and just fall over. Just
Okay,
gonna die.
yep. Old age,
He's
break a
just
hip.
gonna die.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good. And then Gordian the Second.
Gordian the Second is going to die fighting Thrax hand to hand.
Okay. All right. Thrax hand to hand. Okay. Good. So the Senate hears about this, right? They get
new
word
claim,
pretty quick.
right.
And they're like, hell yes. Screw Thrax.
That's right, 'cause
We're
we all
going
hate
with
Thrax.
Gordian. Plus, this was a great opportunity for the Senate because these are former senators who would probably bring them back into the fold. Thrax doesn't give a shit what they think, but Gordian
Right.
probably would.
Right.
So they declare for the Gordians. Many governors around the empire sided with the Gordians when they heard this news, because like I said, very few people like Thrax. The father and son entered Carthage to thunderous cheers by the people. The rebellion was off to a great start. But there was one guy who wasn't too chuffed about the Gordians becoming emperor. And it just so happened that this guy was the governor of the western neighboring province of Numidia. So think North Africa, where Tunisia is, west,
Okay.
Morocco and stuff.
Yeah.
This guy had a personal beef with Gordian, and he was an ardent Thrax supporter.
Oh boy.
Oh, and he also had the only legion in North Africa under his command.
Oh, well, that doesn't bode well. It's
No.
not going to take that long then, huh?
No. No, it won't. So before Thrax likely even knew about the rebellion, this governor was marching his troops east towards Carthage. The Gordians had no troops.
Yeah.
None.
Why would they?
Yeah. So the younger Gordian did what he could to gather up random men from the city and set out at the head of this army.
Oh, man.
And I am sure you will be shocked to learn that they lost.
Dang.
Gordian II died in the fighting, along
Well,
with
I
pretty
was
much
almost right.
everyone. You said hand to hand with Thrax. I was like, you were
did.
so close.
You did.
You were so close. Horrified at the news of his son's death, Gordian I decided to end it himself, and he was found hanged in his rooms when the soldiers arrived. That all took about 3 weeks.
Oh, well,
You're
Dang.
doing it, man. You're getting it.
there's too much chaos here. It's
Yeah.
too unpredictable.
It's like it's a crisis. Okay, so now let's take a look at all of that from Thrax's perspective. He's fighting tribes across the Danube when a messenger arrives and says, hey, the Gordians just declared themselves emperor and the Senate sided with them. Thrax probably started turning his army around right as the second messenger arrived to say, hey, you need to give the governor of Numidia a raise. Also, we should probably go slaughter the Senate.
Also, we should probably just go kill all of the Senate.
Yeah. And so that's what he set out to do.
Good.
And now that the Senate had declared themselves in open revolt, they had no choice but to get themselves some new emperors. Like the good old days of the Republic, they decided to elect 2 men from their ranks to serve as joint emperors and stave off the giant peasant who was, at this very moment, marching toward Italy. These men were Balbinus
Balbinus. Okay.
and Pupienus.
Why? Why are we back to this?
Yes.
Back to this.
Yes. And that is how you say his name. It's not even like Pupianus. It is actually Pupienus.
What a guy.
And I love that so much.
What a guy.
Makes me very happy. So, how long do you think Balbinus is going to last?
Oh, there's 2 of them. These guys are both like senators, right?
Yep.
You
And
said
I'll
that
let
they
you know
choose.
that one's in his 70s and one's in his late 60s.
Oh man.
Yeah, they don't like young people.
Well, yeah, they want to change things. I'm gonna guess they're somehow gonna die before Thrax even gets to Italy.
Okay.
Oh man. A Thrax loyalist is gonna assassinate Pupienus.
Okay. Pupienus dies of assassination.
Yep.
Okay.
And
How long?
oh man, we're gonna give him 8 weeks.
8 weeks. All right.
8 weeks.
Okay.
And then the other guy, he's just gonna fall down all the stairs at the palace.
Okay.
It's a lot of stairs. He's not gonna survive that fall.
Okay. Fall. And how long?
That's like 3 weeks in.
3
You
weeks.
know, he was
Okay.
getting too excited.
Great.
So,
All right. Wonderful. Okay. So Balbinus is going to fall down some stairs in 3 weeks. Pupienus will be assassinated in 8 weeks.
that's right.
All right. Cool.
Yep.
So, and I already told you their age. Good. So, a crowd gathered and threw insults and stones at the men who were preparing to save all their lives. These people were not happy to have 2 patricians in power. The 2 men were not altogether popular with the plebs. The people had been super excited for the Gordians. That was actually good news to them. They loved and respected them both. With that feeling in mind, they demanded that a Gordian be in charge. Damn it.
Aren't they dead? You know,
They are.
I just-
Now, the Senate and the 2 emperors thought the same thing.
Yeah,
They're
huh.
like, guys, they're dead. I don't know what you
I
want.
can't.
But then someone found someone.
Oh, you just listen. You're gonna be a Gordian now. Okay.
Nope, they had one.
Oh,
they actually had one.
Found a Gordian. Wow.
The elder Gordian had a grandson in Rome.
Okay, I really thought you were about to say this is the elder. I'm like, dude was 80.
Yeah.
Who's elder? What do you mean?
His dad actually.
He's still alive. It's crazy.
So they had this younger Gordian who was 13, who they were like, okay, compromise. Pupienus and Balbinus are going to be emperor.
Another one.
Gordian will be Caesar.
Okay.
Can you stop throwing rocks at us, please? And so we now have a Gordian ready as 13-year-old Caesar.
Another one. Good.
We love how that
the
usually
teens
plays
in
out.
there.
Yeah. That settled, the Senate organized the Council of 20 to help the emperors prepare their defense against Thrax. who in early 238 CE was just crossing into Italy and approaching the important city of Aquileia,
Okay.
which is in northeastern Italy.
That makes sense.
It does. It all maths out. Pupienus set out from Rome with what few men he could muster, while the Council of 20 set about blockading roads and ports to cut Thrax's legions off from resupply. Balbinus, meanwhile, was staying in Rome to maintain order.
My theory is all coming together.
It's all coming together, dude. But it was Aquileia itself that was causing the big emperor so much grief. He expected to walk straight into the city, but he found its gates closed to him and its populace all too willing to withstand a siege.
Hey, go away.
We don't want you
don't
here.
like you.
And so a siege was laid.
Yeah.
Within 2 months, Thrax's men were growing tired of this. They had been off fighting the Germans for nearly 3 years. And now what were they doing? Invading their own nation and dying to take their own city from fellow Romans? Plus, Thrax was a man of short temper and was making his fury known to his men, whom he blamed for cowardice and insubordination. Why can't you guys take this stupid city?
Go there.
I don't care if they're dropping boiling oil on you.
Walk in.
Go in and take the city. As one would suspect, the men reached a breaking point. Several praetorians from Rome met up with some of the legionaries and together marched into Thrax's tent, where the giant emperor and his son were slaughtered.
Oh. I wasn't expecting that.
Neither was he.
Yeah, right?
Thrax had reigned for just over 3 years. And you
Dang.
went with less than a year.
I did. I really thought there was going to be a lot more infighting quickly.
Yep. He just had all the armies with him, so
Yeah.
it took a little longer. So, the heads of Thrax and his son were cut off and rushed to Ravenna, where Pupienus was mustering his troops.
Okay.
Once the emperor had proof of his enemy's death, he disbanded his new fighting force and ordered the legions back to go protect the frontiers, guys.
Yeah, man. Keep
Just
the
go.
borders.
The heads then moved on to Rome, where the people celebrated now that the threat was over. Pupienus entered the city a short time later, and great celebrations were held. But this feel-good time would not last. Remember, the people hadn't liked these two new emperors, and neither had the praetorians. Now, the two were bickering about which one of them would be superior. Balbinus, because he was more politically experienced, or Pupienus for his long military career. Pupienus had brought back a detachment of German auxiliaries who were personally loyal to him, and naturally, Balbinus feared that he was going to use them to seize power by force. Meanwhile, Pupienus was disheartened to see that Balbinus had failed to maintain order in the capital while he was gone.
Disappointing.
It was a disappointing time. But that wasn't all his fault. The Senate had factions working to install their own person in the purple, and these two old farts were now in the way, so everything was just kind of not playing out in their hands. Then one night, Pupienus approached Balbinus with grave news. A group of praetorians was rushing the palace.
Oh.
He demanded the Germanic troops be called in to defend them, but Balbinus assumed that this was a trap and refused. This all gets a little
the Germanic troops?
Yeah, the ones that Pupienus brought back with him.
Oh, I was like, they're so far away.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah.
mean?
These were just the auxiliaries.
Gotcha. Yeah,
But it
yeah.
is kind of confused how Balbinus would have a say in whether or not the Germanic troops that are loyal to Pupienus could come help. The sources were a bit confused about who was calling what. Is weird.
Sure. I also wouldn't be surprised. He's in power. I mean,
Right.
he's just
Needs to-
demanding a thing.
Yeah, needs to call for it too. So as these two argued, the praetorians burst into the room and dragged them out.
Good.
The men were stripped, pulled through the streets back to the praetorian camp, where they underwent a good bit of torture, having their beards and eyebrows ripped out and their bodies, quote, mutilated.
And maybe push down some stairs.
I'm sure they were pulled down. So when you said it, I was like, I bet the praetorians pulled them down some stairs. By now, the German troops had heard what was going on and began rushing to the camp.
Oh, well.
So the praetorians heard that and decided that they should probably stop playing with their food. And Balbinus and Pupienus were mercifully killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, mercifully. For sure.
In their place, the praetorians quickly declared the teenage Caesar Gordian.
That's right. The new Gordian. Get him in there.
Gordian the
What is he, like
Third.
14 right now?
13.
He's still 13?
Yes.
Okay. Well.
He is, in fact, the youngest sole emperor ever.
Yay.
Oh, and Balbinus and Pupienus had reigned for about 99 days.
Okay.
And this is why 238 CE is known as the year of the 6 emperors.
The
Woo!
6 emperors.
Yeah, we had the 4, 5, and now 6.
Yeah.
It's
1,
good
2,
times.
3, 4, 5. The 6th one. He's here. He did it. He made it.
You were pretty close on Pupienus with 8 weeks. It would have been
Yeah.
about 12.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, it didn't go well for them.
I really thought those stairs were going to do him in sooner, though.
Yeah. He was probably really careful about that. That was the one thing that he was really cognizant of. Was like, okay, there's a lot of other things going on, but I'm not going to fall down these damn stairs.
That's fair. I get it.
So let's talk briefly to note on our sources from here on out, because this is where they stop existing. Dio's tale, Cassius Dio, ended during Alexander's reign, as did Dio himself. He lived to be around 70 and died around 235, same as Alexander. Now, Herodian's telling goes a little further, and it ends with the death of Balbinus and Pupienus and the accession of Gordian III. Little is known of who Herodian was. It is speculated that he was Syrian, possibly from Antioch. He was likely a civil servant working within the imperial government. He claims everything he wrote about happened during his lifetime, and it is believed that he was an old man during Gordian III's reign. And that's all we know, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
This also means that from here on out, we really only have the Historia Augusta to rely upon, which is not reliable. The Historia Augusta claims that it was written by 6 authors near the end of the crisis during the reigns of Diocletian and Constantine, names that we would do well to remember. But modern thinking is that the book was written by one person in the 4th or 5th century, well over 100 years after the events described.
Oh, okay.
And most of it is complete nonsense. The only reason it is anything more than a silly footnote in historical research is because the only Latin source we have from the time. Everything else is just
it was just gone.
fragmentary records and
burned and destroyed,
or written much
probably
later
through all the chaos. Yeah.
Yep. This makes it a bit easier to research because I don't need to cross-check things, but
right.
It also means we don't have anywhere near the amount of detail, and I don't want to just be like, yeah, the Historia Augusta says, because it's nonsense. So, Gordian III. In mid-238 CE, Gordian became the 13-year-old emperor. How long do you think he will last, and how will he die?
The people wanted the Gordian.
They did.
They wanted him.
Yeah, they sure did.
They got him. Let's see. How long is he going to last? We're out of the... We just finished the year of the 6 emperors?
He is the 6th, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So he's going to last... He's going to last 6 years.
6 years? Cool.
He's going to last 6 years. And he's going to die fighting the Persians.
Fighting the Persians. Perfect. Okay. So let's take a look at our boy. Being so young, Gordian would certainly have had someone else running the show right off the bat. We do not know who was in control at this time. One source mentions his mother, but we don't even know who she was with any level of certainty. Soon, however, a man named Gaius Furius Sabinius Aquila
Yes.
Timesitheus. There we go.
I'm gonna call him Guy Fieri.
Guy Fieri. In my notes, I have him mainly listed as Timmy. So, Guy Fieri, or Timmy, stepped in as the primary regent for this young emperor. Now, Timesitheus has been moving about in our story for a while now, just as our standard equestrian working his way up the ranks. We know that he was a prefect of the cohort, either under Severus or Caracalla, and then later a financial administrator all the way out in Arabia.
Okay.
So he's kind of been everywhere. He might have played a part in Macrinus's death, Macrinus being the guy that followed Caracalla, as he was a loyal Severan man. He then continued climbing the ranks of imperial administration during the reigns of the next several Severans, Elagabalus, Alexander. Thrax kept him around because he was so good at his job that he could not afford to lose him. This was when Thrax was trying to get every cent out of every pocket to fund his campaigns. And Timmy was really good at financial administration. Once Gordian III was in power, our boy Timmy was being declared the, quote, best of patrons up in Gaul, because the people loved him so much while he was in charge that they even made a massive inscription about his career, which is why we know so much about him. This prestige and past experience were enough to put Timmy back in favor with the imperial court. And with Gordian in desperate need of guidance, Gordian married Timmy's daughter and soon after appointed Timmy as Praetorian prefect. This role was now more admin than military, but Timmy was great at both.
Okay. I was like, dude's a financial guy.
Yeah.
And he's in charge of, okay.
He started out in the military, but then everyone was like, wow, you're really good at everything.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah. Great. So we have someone in charge who seems capable of the job and who is not a giant peasant with a lust for war. But this is the crisis, so let's look at how it all falls apart. Firstly, in the fateful year of 238 CE, not only did we have the year of the 6 emperors and a failing economy brought about by constant warfare along the Rhine and the Danube, we also had the first appearance of the Goths.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know them.
This tribe, yeah, me too. I was like, I know them. Do I?
Well, I
Do
know of them.
Yeah, they ride
name's
horses, I
familiar.
think.
Yeah.
This tribe moved in from the east and joined along in the fighting near the Danube. They will be here for, let's say the next 300 years.
Yeah, it was a while.
Yeah,
A while.
they are a problem for a long time. Some earthquakes had also hit around this time, so it was kind of like living in the 2020s, where everything just could not help but fall apart. And it was right around this time that an envoy arrived to inform Gordian and Timmy that the Persians were invading again.
There we go. I knew it was coming.
Yep. So last time we saw this new Sassanid Empire under Alexander, Ardashir had solidified his position and invaded the Roman East. After a close campaigning season, both sides went, okay, let's just time out. We're going to take a breather here. This was close to a decade ago by now. And the Sassanids were ready once again. And they began their push when the son of Ardashir took the city of Hatra. If that city sounds at all familiar, it's because Trajan and Severus had both failed to capture it during their respective invasions of Parthia. Now, this Shapur, the son of Ardashir, did what those great generals could not. Shapur was, at this time, serving as co-regent alongside his father, who was getting pretty old. With his army in tow, he marched into Mesopotamia to push the Romans out once and for all. Timesitheus quickly set about mobilizing troops to push back the invasion in 241 CE. Along the way east, the legions fought off the Goths, who had crossed the Danube before pushing on into Syria. Over the next year and change, the two sides duked it out. The conclusive battle came in 243 CE at Rassena. Shapur, who was now Shapur I, ruling as sole ruler after his father's death, was defeated. Several major cities were recaptured by the Romans, and plans were made to push for the capital of Ctesiphon. The old Roman tradition. We sack Ctesiphon. It's what we do. Plans for the invasion had to be put on hold, however, as our boy Timmy, Guy Fieri, the one holding it all together, suddenly fell ill and died.
No.
Yeah.
No.
This guy really could have saved everything had he stayed alive.
It was all looking good.
It was all a dream, a fairy tale.
It's all just a dream.
But we'll never know. As a point of reference for how cool Timmy is versus Gordian III, Wikipedia has pages on pages on pages on Timmy. Gordian III's entire page is 10 paragraphs.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That's it. Obviously, the Romans needed a moment to regroup after the death of their commander-in-chief. Fortunately, by this point, the emperor was with the army, so no one was going to be able to just declare themselves and then march back.
I mean, they could.
They might be able to.
It's already happened.
We'll see. We'll see. So first things first, a new Praetorian prefect was needed. The man chosen was Marcus Julius Philippus. He was selected partly because he was worthy, and partly because Timmy's co-prefect was Philippus's brother, Priscus. How cute. Brothers working together. Next in the order of things was to inform the Senate of how well the army had done and to celebrate a triumph. Yay, Gordian, you did it. Finally, plans were drawn up for the following campaign season to continue the attack on the Persians. So what happened in 244 CE out in the east is a great mystery. Sparse sources and being far from home will do that to record keeping. But we will go with this. The Battle of Misish, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, which is near modern Fallujah, Iraq.
Okay.
At that battle, the Romans suffered a terrible defeat. At that same time, Gordian III died.
Dang it.
The Sassanid version claims he was killed in the battle himself.
But it's too early.
No, you're pretty close.
Oh, okay.
Hold on, we'll get there. So the Sassanids said that they killed him in battle, and that is mostly the accepted version today. Other thoughts are that after the defeat, the army was frustrated with their 19-year-old liege. Seeing his position becoming insecure, Gordian demanded the troops choose between him and their other option, Philippus.
Why would you do that? Wow.
Yeah, that gamble didn't pay off.
Why would you do that?
Whatever the truth, the emperor was dead and the men were deep in enemy territory.
Nice. Died fighting the Persians.
Just shy of 6 years.
That's what I'm talking about. That
I'm gonna
one's
give it
almost
to you.
perfect.
I'm going to give you a check on that
perfect.
one.
Yeah.
6 years, possibly died fighting the Persians, if not died right after losing to the Persians.
I mean, he was in a campaign against the Persians when he died.
Yep.
So
Well done. Proud of you. So now we've got this boy Philippus out with the troops.
Good old Phil.
How long will he last?
God, they're
How will
deep
he
in
die?
enemy territory.
Deep.
Yeah.
Deep in enemy territory.
We're gonna give him 6 months of trying to fight out of enemy territory.
I don't want to give you spoilers, but that sounds. There's a different guy later that exact thing happens.
Love it.
So also fighting the Persians.
He's not gonna die fighting the Persians. One of his men's gonna kill him to
Okay.
save himself.
Okay, his men
Because they'll get an offer. They'll get an offer from
couldn't
the
refuse.
Persians.
Couldn't refuse.
Yeah,
All right, so his men kill him.
that's right.
6 months in. Cool. So Philippus today is known as Philip the Arab because of probably where he came from.
Makes sense.
But he was an intelligent man. Mm-hmm. He had seen the fall of several military emperors and set out to avoid their mistakes. The biggest problem for men like Macrinus and Thrax was they never went to Rome to assert themselves. Macrinus had tried after waiting a while, then he died. Thrax only went to Rome to conquer it. Didn't pay off for them. So to do this, he needed to make peace with Shapur. He couldn't just leave. The war was not going too well for the Romans now because of this major defeat, but it had been going well prior. So the Persians had suffered a lot as well. And like the last time, they were both kind of just like, can we just maybe stop?
No, don't stop. You have to kill him.
Yeah, not going to happen.
You have to kill him.
The terms were not great, but Philip managed to maintain some of the captured lands. However, he gave up Roman influence over Armenia and agreed to pay 500,000 denarii to the Sassanids plus an annual indemnity. Not popular.
No.
But
That money-
that's settled. Philip put his brother Priscus in charge of the east while he rushed back to Rome with Gordian's ashes. Once there, he announced the emperor had died from illness. Yeah, which is why it's all so confused
I don't
about.
believe him. I think he's just trying to save face for the peace.
Yeah. I also want to point out, I didn't write any of this in my script, but Gordian III is probably one of the saddest emperors because he was like an orphan who was then thrust into this against his will,
Right.
and then died out doing something he was not ready to do.
For sure.
It was really unfortunate for him. The Senate, though, obviously deified Gordian III, and a grand funeral was held. As mentioned, this time period is really spotty on details. We know that Philip left Rome shortly after his return to head back to the Danube frontier, because the Danube was never calm during the 3rd century. The Carpi and the Goths were invading again, and Philip would spend the next couple years fighting them in the Carpic and Gothic wars. So you didn't get it on this one.
Dang it.
By 247 CE, Philip returned to Rome victorious. Meanwhile, in the east, his brother Priscus was doing everything he could to piss everyone off.
Good.
Taxes were extremely high, and his rule was severe. This led to a revolt, which was swiftly put down. However, Priscus then just disappears from the historic record. We have no idea what happened to him.
He's just not there anymore.
Just gone.
All right.
Now, unlike his brother, Philip did his best to rule in a way that would not piss everyone off. In particular, he went back to the old ways of treating the Senate with respect so they wouldn't try to overthrow him.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, sometime in here, the Armenians decided that they didn't like Shapur, and so the East was once again uneasy. But Philip had something more important on his mind around this time: Ludi Seculares. This was the 1000th anniversary of the founding of the city of Rome.
Oh boy, gotta throw a big party.
huge. Accounts claim that over 1,000 gladiators died in the Colosseum, along with hundreds of animals, which seems like underkill from some of the other celebrations we hear about earlier, where they're like 10,000 dogs were slaughtered and 50 lions, But either way, big celebration. It was huge. I imagine that this was a great relief to the people who are like, thank God something good is happening.
Sure.
This has been rough for a while now. But Philip could not celebrate for long. The Danube legions had risen up and declared their general emperor.
Oh my God, why?
Don't worry about it. They killed him short time later.
Okay.
So another one would pop up, and that one took some time to put down. But then 2 others rose up, and they fell almost as quickly. So, yeah.
But this guy's doing a good job.
Yeah, that's irrelevant in the crisis period. Like, genuinely, that is irrelevant.
I just don't care.
So, hoping to keep the Danube legions in line, since they had risen up twice in a very short period, Philip sent the respected senator Quintus Decius Valerinus? See, when I write these, they sound, I know how to read them in my head.
Sure.
And then I say them out loud for the first time to you, and I go, huh. So Quintus Decius Valerinus to govern Moesia and Pannonia. Now, this seems like a pretty foolish thing to do. Remember, Caracalla had ensured no governor had control of more than 1 legion. Well, now Decius had several legions, and legions that were already willing to rebel. Decius quickly defeated the Goths, who were still causing a ruckus. This was a big deal, because the Goths were seeming like an unstoppable horde with limitless men and horses. The troops, as was now tradition when victory was won, declared Decius emperor.
Of course they did.
Of course. The only thing left to do was to march on Rome.
Yeah.
Philip went out to meet the usurper, and despite Decius trying to talk terms with his former ruler and being like, maybe we can split it, the 2 sides were soon fighting in the Battle of Beroea. Beroe? One of those. It was in this battle that Philip the Arab was killed.
Darn.
Or maybe his troops killed him after the battle was lost. We don't know. When news reached Rome, Philip's 11-year-old son, who had been named Co-Augustus years earlier, was killed by the Praetorians.
Oh.
Philip had ruled for 5 years.
Darn.
Yeah.
He got out of enemy territory really quick.
He did. He got that piece.
But he did get killed by his own men, potentially.
Yeah. I just want you to,
half right.
In 2 years when we get to that other guy, just remember that I said, yeah, that one couldn't get out of there. So, with what little info we know of Decius, you might think that he's just another Thrax or Philip. I have the troops. I'm now in charge.
It doesn't seem like that, though.
But he wasn't a military leader in the same sense as those two. While he did take power from being at the head of a legion, he was far more known for his political career than his military one. So how long do you think Decius is going to last, and how will he die? Oh
man, he's got the Praetorians on his side, so I think Rome is probably going to be at least relatively accepting. He's gonna. Oh man. They just put down the Goths. I don't know. Persia's probably not quite a threat yet. Again, but soon maybe. I don't know. I'll give him 4.5 years.
4.5 years. And how will he die?
He's a political man, so he'll be assassinated. In Rome.
Okay.
From some other political adversary who's going to take the power.
Perfect. Okay. So he was a distinguished senator who was born in the Balkans, the first emperor to have this distinction. He had been consul in 232 CE, then governor of Moesia, Lower Germany, and Hispania. When Philip came to power, he was the urban prefect of Rome. So he had plenty of experience leading from the civil side. Like Philip, he knew he needed to head to Rome to consolidate his power. He spent several months there between the end of 249 and the beginning of 250. While there, he took on the nickname of Trajanus, or Trajanus, I'm not sure, after Trajan. While there, he began works on the Baths of Decius, which would be completed in 252 and survived well into the 16th century. The Colosseum also needed some work because it had been struck by lightning for like the 10th time. It just keeps happening. In 250 CE, Decius did something that has marked him as a villain in history. He persecuted the Christians. Sort of. Kind of.
Oh, sort of.
The decree that he issued called for all citizens, which meant pretty much everyone in the empire since Caracalla had granted citizenship to almost everybody. Everyone needed to perform a sacrifice for the emperor by a certain date. And this sacrifice needed to be overseen by government officials.
That's not going to go well for the Christians.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
Yeah, this wasn't necessarily an attack on Christians, as Decius likely just wanted to instill some unity in the unstable empire. Be like, hey, the empire's strong. Sacrifice to your emperor, and everything's going to be okay. The gods are on our side. But Christians simply could not follow this order. They could not make sacrifice to, quote, false gods.
That's right.
And eat sacrificial
Blasphemy.
foods. It is. So they were like, I don't know. So those Christians who refused the order were subject to torture and execution. While this decree was not enforced evenly across the empire, there were plenty of Christians who were just kind of like, okay, maybe you just go over there and we'll pretend like we're not doing this. Carthage and Alexandria, two of the biggest cities in the empire, saw a lot of anti-Christian violence. And this is like people just being like, you know what, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
The most famous martyr of this decree was none other than the Pope himself.
Oh, wow.
Pope Fabian. Yeah. It is unclear how Fabian died, but it was either in his prison cell or via execution by the state. So not good. This wasn't a good time to be a Christian at all. And though Decius' decree did not seem to be specifically targeting them, they drew the short end of the stick. Either you went against God and did the sacrifice, or you risked punishment. But Decius didn't really have time to think about the plight of the Christians, because shortly after this decree, the Goths invaded again.
Yay.
Because this is the crisis, and those bastards aren't going away anytime soon.
Right.
This time, they allied themselves with the governor of Thrace, who declared himself emperor in opposition to Decius.
Everyone. You get an emperor. You get an emperor.
Exactly. Thankfully, he died soon after. Decius headed out to the front to then fight the incursion off. The war was still ongoing in 251 CE when Decius got word that another usurper had risen up, this time back in the capital. He had the backing of the people and the Senate, which was not good.
The guy in the capital.
Yeah,
I see.
the usurper had all the support he needed back in Rome. Thankfully, this usurper was quickly taken care of by a man that we will get to know quite well next time.
Oh,
Valerian.
I like the name, though.
Me too. Valerian is a sick name. But we're not there yet. Decius was still out on the Danube fighting the Goths, and though the war was going well, things were about to take a terrible turn. He and his son, who was co-emperor at this point, were pressing the attack when disaster struck.
Oh, boy.
A quote about the father and son duo from Aurelius Victor's Book of the Caesars. Quote, "Very many report that the son had fallen in battle while pressing an attack too boldly. That the father, however, had strenuously asserted that the loss of one soldier seemed to him too little to matter. And so he resumed the war and died in a similar manner, fighting vigorously." So,
dang it.
Both emperors died fighting the Goths. Decius is often marked as the first Roman emperor to die in battle against a foreign army, which assumes that Gordian III did not die in battle against the Sassanids.
It's a lie.
Yeah, because Jordan said it.
That's right.
So, Decius had reigned for a few months shy of 2 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
A lot happened. A lot happened in that time. Jeez, okay. The way you were talking, I was like, oh, man, he reigned for like 8 years.
Yeah, but there's just always war.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So many emperors popping up.
Well,
it's
and
mine now.
Well, and now the question is, who's next?
Well, you said Valerian.
Not yet.
Oh, we're just going to get to know him later.
Yeah.
Whoever. Oh, wait. No, he killed that usurper. Oh, man.
You haven't heard this guy's name yet. So
obviously not. It's going to be some other random senator, general, someone, governor out in the... I am the emperor now.
Correct. Trebonianus Gallus was the governor of Upper Moesia from 250 CE, and so was right there in the thick of the fighting against the Goths. He was with Decius. And like Decius, he had a distinguished senatorial career and had been consul.
Perfect.
Now, the men of the legions declared him emperor because...
Why not?
Who else?
Exactly.
There's no one else. Some later claimed that the Gothic trap that caught Decius and his son was set by Gallus, but most historians don't believe that. To help keep the peace during the regime change, Gallus appointed Decius's younger surviving son, Hostilian, as co-emperor. Basically to say, I didn't do it.
That's right.
I will co-rule. He's too young to do it himself, but he will be co-emperor, and my son will be Caesar.
That's a nice move.
It was very smart. So let me mark this down. So we've got Gallus. Mm-hmm. And normally we wouldn't, you've seen that there's been a lot of co-emperors that we didn't actually talk about, but we'll put Hostilian on here too. Son of Decius. So how long will Gallus last?
Gallus is going to last a good old 5 years.
5
I'm gonna give him
years?
5 years. Wait, no, he was right at the front of the Gothic fighting, huh? But he's got to go back to Rome, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm going to give him 5 years.
Okay, how will he die?
He's going to die fighting the Goths again,
Fighting
unfortunately.
Goths.
They're going to
Okay.
go back out there.
Good. And then Hostilian.
Hostilian's going to unfortunately die by an accident in like a year and a half.
1.5 years.
So that Valerian's son
Accident.
Caesar will be the co-emperor instead.
Great.
But it's
I'll
going
put
to be
accident in
tragic.
quotes.
It's going to be tragic.
It
Yeah,
will.
for
Everyone will be
sure.
very sad about it.
100%.
All right, good. Okay. So Hostilian became emperor alongside Decius in June of 251 CE, and by July of 251 CE, he was dead.
Wow, that was quick. I gave him some credit. I was like, okay, he's not going to do it immediately. He's going to give it some time, make it look good.
Yeah, just like no, we were bros. I don't know what happened to him.
Okay, yeah.
So
man,
predominant theory from Aurelius Victor is that he actually died from the plague.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Some say poison. Because right after, obviously,
Accident.
Gallus's son became co-emperor.
I was right about that.
Yeah. So there's that. Now, this plague that may have killed Hostilian is actually a thing, and it was going to be a problem for Gallus's reign.
Plagues usually are. Yeah.
Now, Gallus, like you said, was out fighting the Goths, so he quickly made a peace with them so that he could do what you're supposed to do and go back to Rome.
Yeah.
And this was annoying because he allowed them to keep the wealth they had plundered
Oh.
and all the Roman prisoners they had taken,
Oh.
which isn't good.
Yeah.
On top of that, he promised yearly payments to keep them away, and I'm sure that will last a very long time.
Yeah, like about a year, maybe.
Anyway.
Before they even get their next payment. They're like, I'm bored.
I would rather just, you guys are really weak.
I can just take it. I can see it. I'm going to take it.
Once that was settled, he rushed back to Rome, where the plague was in full swing. He earned the love and respect of the people by doing all he could to help those affected, and even providing proper burial service for the lowliest plebs of the city. But nothing was going to go well for poor Gallus. Our old friend in the East, Shapur I, decided it was the perfect time to invade the empire
There
again.
it is. I knew it was coming.
And he was right. He quickly overpowered the Eastern legions and soon had full control of Syria, along with Antioch, which was considered the third city of the empire at this time.
Yeah.
This wasn't good. As we should now expect, the Goths, under King Caniva, which is a dope name, also broke their agreement and once again crossed the Danube.
I'm shocked. Oh.
I, for one, am completely shocked by this development. They started wreaking havoc. Fortunately, the guy who replaced Gallus as governor of Upper Moesia, Aemilius Aemilianus, was quickly able to defeat the Goths and send them packing. And since I mentioned his name, I'm sure you know where this is going.
I'm the emperor now.
The crisis is defined mostly by governors and generals winning a major victory and immediately being declared emperor by the troops. And so it was with Aemilianus. Gallus and his son, who I said was now co-emperor since Hostilian's death, began their march from Rome to meet the oncoming usurper's army and then hopefully also continue east to go fight Shapur. He also called Valerian, who was up in the Rhine region at this time, to come assist him, and Valerian immediately headed out. But Valerian would not arrive in time. Aemilianus marched quickly, so quickly that Gallus was taken by surprise before he even left Italy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It is unclear what actually happened during this fight, as it is with most things in the crisis, or if there even was a fight. Either Gallus and his men lost and then the men killed him, or the troops defected and killed him and his son before the battle began. Either way, Gallus had reigned just a couple months more than 2 years.
Darn.
Now it was Aemilianus's turn to right this sinking ship.
Oh, my God. Everyone's turn to I don't understand.
Yeah. So Aemilianus, how long?
A year.
1 year. And how's he going to die?
Fighting the Persians, because he's got to now go stop that.
Fighting Persians. That's gonna be a theme for a while. How did that emperor die? Fighting the Persians. I don't know. So, Aemilianus, as he marched in, had been declared an enemy of the state by Gallus in the Senate.
Sure.
But after his victory, he declared that he wasn't trying to be emperor. Okay? He was going to be the head general and go sort out the Goths and the Persians and then relinquish power. That's what he wanted. That's what he said he wanted.
No.
The Senate, who was unable to mount any meaningful resistance, they just kind of acquiesced and granted him the imperial titles. But none of that really mattered, because who was currently marching south to avenge Gallus?
Valerian.
That's right.
Or Valerius, whatever his name
Valerian
is.
was on the move, and you will be completely shocked to learn that his men had already declared him emperor.
I for one could not imagine that happening.
Most were not happy with Aemilianus, and his men soon killed him to avoid the civil war
Oh my God.
with the larger force led by Valerian. The writer Eutropius had this to say about Aemilianus. Quote, Aemilianus came from an extremely insignificant family. His reign was even more insignificant, and he was slain in the 3rd month.
Yes.
He had ruled for about 88 days.
Yeah.
The Senate then declared damnation memoria against him, damning his memory for all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really bad for him.
Yes. It did not work out for him. It's like you could have beat the Goths and then been like, hey, Gallus, or who was it? Yeah, Gallus. Let's just go beat the Persians together. And I won't be emperor.
Yeah, or just send him a note being, hey man,
Yeah.
I want to go be the head general of fighting the Persians.
Yeah. Can I do that, please? So, there you have it.
Oh my God.
We have traversed the beginning of the crisis of the 3rd century.
That's crazy.
It is not done, nor are we at rock bottom yet.
No. Well, no.
But as I mentioned earlier, Valerian is a notable emperor worth diving into. So we will not gloss over his reign like the others. And in fact, we will probably be doing he and his son at the same time.
Oh, okay.
I haven't decided, but with the kind of sparse information, it might be a normal length episode to cover them both because they both ruled together. To give a little more context about just how tumultuous this time period was, I wanted to take a look at the previous 2 centuries of the empire and how many emperors there were. Mm-hmm. So Augustus began his reign approximately 27 BCE and died in 14 CE. Mm-hmm. So he will count as our first century emperor. Then we had Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero before the year of the 4 emperors, which was Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and then Vespasian. His son Titus didn't live very long, and then his other son Domitian took over before the century was rounded out by the short-lived Nerva. Now, since Augustus ruled for a couple decades prior to the 1st century, we had 12 emperors in about 120 years. And
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And if we exclude those losers of the year of the 4 emperors, we had 9.
Yeah.
That's long continuity of government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Into the 2nd century we go. Trajan did start his reign in 98 CE, but most of it was 2nd century, so we'll just count him in there. He was followed by Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius, who co-ruled with Lucius Verus, and they completed the Golden Age. Next came Commodus, and the problems of the empire began. And then we had the short-lived Pertinax and Didius Julianus, our boy.
Yeah.
And finally, Septimius Severus, whose reign was split about half between 2nd and 3rd century, so we'll count him in both. That means that the 2nd century had 9 emperors, 7 if you exclude the losers of the year of the 5 emperors, because 2 of them, that's a misnomer. There was
right.
really
so brief, not really. Yeah.
And 2 of them were just usurpers who never really were emperor. So that's crazy. But that's where you can see the Golden Age, because we had long reigns of steady rule. Now we are in the 3rd century, where it's a bit more difficult determining who was an emperor. But if we count everyone who held power and every son who was named co-emperor, we're looking at about 36 emperors.
Nice.
And that's a ridiculous number.
Let's get it going.
for such a short time period. And hence the crisis of the 3rd century.
I can't imagine why there's just chaos everywhere and it can't really seem to get any traction to stability.
Can we stop trying to overthrow the guy who's doing all right? Like,
yeah, right, for real. Can you just support him? I don't know.
Like, this would be really great if you just stopped usurping. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up. How do you think our boy Valerian and his son Gallienus are going to do next time?
Better than the last 34
Maybe.
emperors we just talked about.
Wait, no. We're in the middle of that number.
Oh.
Yeah, we're still in. Yeah, that's.
Okay.
I didn't want to tell you the
Sorry.
names.
Then better than the last, like,
many did we
whatever,
cover?
8 or 12.
So we had Alexander, Thrax, Gordian 1 and 2, Balbinus Pupienus, Gordian 3, Philippus, Decius, Gallus, Hostilian, Aemilianus, and then a few of their sons. So today we covered like 16.
Yeah. Well, he's going to do better than them.
Yeah, gonna do a little better than those guys.
He's going to reign for like 9 to 12 years.
A little longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been absolutely wonderful. I'll try and get episodes out quicker than I have, but you know me.
Life
Life and stuff, you know. All right. Bye.